whether you wear a badge or not. If you care about courage, clarity, discipline, and the price of decisions in the moment that define lives, you've come to the right place. This is where training meets consequence, where the law collides with human behavior, and the fog of uncertainty tests the limits of reason. These are the stories of pressure, of purpose, and what it means to hold the line when the world loses balance. I'm Don, a police officer, instructor, and founder of Forecast Securities Group, and I'll be your guide through the storm. Welcome to the Conditions Report. Hello, and welcome back. I'm glad you're here. If this is your first time joining me, here's what the show is. The Conditions Report is a weekly series where we read the sky of policing the way the pilot reads the weather. Every episode follows the same structure. We start with the statutory climate. That's the constitutional baseline you operate inside. Then we move to the legal front. That's where real cases stress test the rules and show you the edges. After that, we'll shift to the leadership climate, the maxim you can carry into the field, the locker room, the briefing room when it really matters. We finish with an extended forecast. That's the practical week ahead application you can use on the street tonight. The idea behind the show is simple. Policing is an environment, and that environment changes fast. The legal and cultural atmosphere move. If you can't read the sky, you'll get caught inside the storm. And the goal here is clarity. See the system, understand the rules, and make decisions that stand up in the court. The Conditions Report is part of the Forecast, a project by Forecast Securities Group, LLC, the training and consulting company I founded. We help professionals in high-risk environments operate with legality, precision, and clarity. And before we begin, the disclaimer. This presentation is for educational purposes only. It is not legal advice, and I'm not an attorney. I do not represent any agency, department, or government, and I speak only on behalf of Forecast Securities Group. If you're dealing with an actual case, consult a qualified attorney. Tonight is Christmas. It's actually pouring down rain. We're running the show actually on the backup generator as we speak. And Christmas is not one single thing. It's the light in the windows, the darkness between the houses. It's quiet roads and sudden speed. It's families gathered, families splintering. It's generosity and exhaustion, nostalgia and debt, kindness and impatience. They all occupy the same small hours. It feels like a pause. It does feel earned. Early in my career, still in my first phase of field training when I was a California Highway Patrolman, my first phase FTO told me something that didn't belong to the season at all. He said, "Injury and death don't observe holidays." And at the time, I thought it sounded harsh. Years later, though, it sounds precise. And with that in mind, let's start where we always do, the statutory climate. Christmas tends to alter perception. The streets stretch, traffic thins, the storefronts go dark, the radio slows down. It's never silent, but it's more spacious, as though the night itself has decided to leave room between things. People respond to that space. They drive farther than they should. They drink more than they planned. They delay decisions that should not be delayed. And they trust the night to absorb the consequences. The law does not participate in this trust or tradition. The Constitution does not register December 25th. Statutes do not ease themselves for celebration. And the Fourth Amendment does not grow softer under string lights. Liability does not thin with traffic. What has changed is not the law, but how we schedule it. Today, as you know, most courts are closed on Christmas. Doors are locked, the calendar is cleared, the clerks are all home, and from the outside, it looks like the system itself has gone still. That is new. For much of the American history, courts did not close for Christmas. Judges issued opinions on December 25th without comment. State courts resolved disputes when they were ready, and the law moved alongside celebration, not behind it. A courthouse can be dark while the law remains fully awake. Rights still exist, obligations still attach, and conduct still carries consequences. Christmas produces a double image. One layer shows calm, another holds gravity, but both are real. That overlap is the statutory climate tonight. The legal front is, if you want to know what the law does on Christmas, don't look for ceremony, look for the work. You look for the disputes that did not stop simply because a date carried meaning. You look for people who believe the season would change how the system behaved, and you look for places where that belief met reality. In 1840, the Kentucky Court of Appeals decided a case, Brittle v. Vest, on Christmas Day. It was a simple trespass case, a dispute over land boundaries, and the kind that grows out of proximity and persistence. One parcel pressed too close to another, the owner convinced that the line had been crossed. And these cases rarely begin with a lawsuit. They begin with irritation, then certainty, then refusal. And by the time the matter reached the court, it was no longer about the season. It was about whether the law would recognize the boundary and enforce it. The court addressed the legal question presented and issued its decision. The opinion does not even acknowledge Christmas Day. It doesn't slow down, doesn't soften. It resolves the dispute and moves on, in the way courts do when they are doing their work. Somewhere nearby, people were likely gathered indoors, passing food, stories, and somewhere else, the law fixed a line and held it. 20 years later, again on Christmas Day in 1860, the Iowa Supreme Court decided Mullen v. Bloomer. The case ended in a foreclosure. Foreclosure is not a sudden process. It's a procedural and patient process, a sequence of missed obligation followed by notice, opportunity, and eventually enforcement. The law gives time until time runs out. The court's decision, issued on December 25th, recorded the end of that sequence. Property changed hands because the obligations had failed. The opinion did not comment on the date. It simply recognized that a legal process had reached its conclusion. In 1890, the Maine Supreme Judicial Court issued a decision in Baker v. Carter. On Christmas Day again, the case involved a family debt and who was legally responsible. A wife had incurred debt without authorization from her husband. The husband contested this liability, and the legal framework reflects a different era in American history. But the tension remains familiar. Christmas has always been a time when spending accelerates and judgment softens. Credit extends to meet expectations, and the law arrives later, unsentimental to the extent. The court applied the statute as written and assigned responsibility accordingly. In 1898, the Ohio Supreme Court decided Village of Oak Harbor v. Gallagher on Christmas Day again, with the opinion dated December 25th. A billboard tore loose during an extraordinary windstorm. Fell. Somebody was injured, and the city sued. The court examined the foreseeability and control and found no liability. Wind does not coordinate with calendars. On Christmas Day in 1884, a federal court in Louisiana decided the Prince George. Italian immigrants crossed the Atlantic under conditions that violated federal law. Food was withheld, provisions were inadequate, and the court ordered compensation on Christmas Day. This relief granted was not generosity, it was a legal obligation enforced. Much later, in the United States v. Hernandez case, which is a Fifth Circuit 1984 case, federal agents were conducting controlled cocaine operation. Undercover officers had facilitated negotiations, transactions leading to arrests, and the entire operation took place on Christmas Eve. The defendants argued entrapment, including the claim that undercover operations should not occur during a Christmas holiday as it shocks the conscience. It's a religious sacrosanct. The Fifth Circuit rejected the argument. Entrapment doctrine applied as it always does. Inducement, predisposition, no holiday exception. The court appears only as a date. And according to the Law on Christmas, a University of Michigan legal study, 107 judicial opinions have been issued on December 25th in American history. 14 of them federal, 93 state, and 62% of all of those have been from Connecticut. Today, the courts are closed. The machinery grinds to a halt, and the foundation remains, which brings us to the leadership climate. The record shows that the last time a United States court issued an opinion on December 25th was in 1949. That silence has now lasted 76 years. It is a small fact, easy to pass over, but it lingers once you notice. Before that year, Christmas was simply another square on a calendar. Courts ruled, when they were ready. Decisions were written when dispute reached their end. Today, though, slowly that habit has changed. Calendars are cleared, doors are closed. The machinery learned how to rest. Outside those buildings, though, the world did not make that same adjustment. Cars still move through the night. Roads open up and invite speed. Houses fill and thin and fill again. Voices rise and fall. Glasses are emptied. Alongside of that movement, other systems remain fully awake. Fire stations are lit. Ambulances idle at curbs. Patrol cars move through long stretches of quiet road. Radios open, engines warm, and the calls, they still trickle in. Some nights are quieter. Injury and death have always lived in that quiet space. They occur without announcement or warning. They arrive where conditions allow them to arrive, and the seasons pass through them without effect. The sentence I read to you earlier in this work is not meant to intrude or ruin the holiday. It's meant to describe reality. Injury and death do not observe holidays. The work, then, is not to resist Christmas, but to move through it with clear eyes, to know which system takes a pause and which ones do not, to keep your footing when the ground feels softer than it really is, and the night goes on, and so does the responsibility that comes with. Tonight's extended forecast: this week, expect long stretches of quiet, followed by sudden wait. Expect fewer calls, but not simpler ones. Expect decisions delayed until they cannot be delayed any longer. Expect open roads and judgment dulled by alcohol. Expect distance to feel forgiving right up until it's not. Work slower than the night invites you to. Let silence remain silence. Let urgency arrive on its own time, and when it does, meet it clearly. This Christmas, and for the last few, there's been an empty chair. Andrew Camilleri, ID number 21653 of the California Highway Patrol, was tragically killed in the line of duty on December 24th, 2017. At approximately 11:32 p.m., Officer Camilleri was seated in the passenger seat of a marked patrol vehicle, stopped near West Winton Avenue on-ramp to southbound Interstate 880. A drunk driver, later convicted of murder and sentenced to state prison, drove onto the shoulder and struck the patrol vehicle. There was no warning. There was no opportunity to move. Officer Camilleri was transported to St. Rose, but he succumbed to his injuries. Andrew and I worked out of the same office, and I won't pretend to know him very well, but I always have the highest respect for anybody who has put on a uniform and had to make the ultimate sacrifice. He was a colleague, a husband, a father, and a presence in a patrol car that will unfortunately never be felt again. Some institutions will pause for the holiday. The work does not. The roads remain open, the calls will still come in, and responsibility still remains, and so does the duty to remember those who carried it all the way through the night. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk with you all. I'm grateful for every single subscriber. Merry Christmas and good night. I'm Don, and this has been Conditions Report, Episode 12. Be the calm in the storm of clarity and confusion, and as always, influence the weather.